Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is so much here. I mean, we have pretty wide-ranging, and so I kind of don't know where to start. But I will start by raising another issue that hasn't been raised here on duplication. We talk about the frustration of small business or the frustration of American business, and we think about the federal government writ large and who's doing what and duplication between agencies. But a lot of frustration that I hear is inconsistency and duplication between state and local regulation and federal regulation. And we haven't, I just want to lay down that marker because we haven't even begun to talk about addressing those concerns. You know, you take a look at Uniform Law Commission that was created to try and ease commerce across jurisdictions. We have all these various regulatory responsibilities that states have taken on or local municipalities have taken on because they reflect their political ethic and they aren't necessarily lending a path forward for interstate commerce. But that's probably an editorial comment I didn't need to make. I want to, Mr. Shapiro, in your testimony, you recommended that the bill that we've introduced for retrospective, I like to call it my prospective retrospective bill, because it would require any new regulation to actually think about how we're going to review that regulation into the future. And we really thought very hard about flexibility, and we said, what better way than make it part of the review process, part of the drafting process to say, this is what we think would be appropriate. We're going to get notice and comment from the industry, from other stakeholders on what would be an appropriate look back. And so I was surprised when I read that you thought it was inflexible, because we pretty much thought that what we created, although we didn't want to leave this open-ended completely, so we put some time frame on it. 10 years, kind of a long time, right? So I'm surprised, quite honestly, and would like further comment that you think that this isn't flexible enough, and what you would do to make it more flexible, and in your vision of how we could make that piece of legislation work better.
Thank you, Senator, and I think it is obvious that you were concerned about that and try to address it. Perhaps the point that's missing in the bill is that when you do these regulatory lookbacks, you have to do them under your statutory mission. And these regulatory requirements in various statutes across the government vary widely. And so I think perhaps what we need to be careful of is that we're not asking an agency to do a type of review. I agree with you, 10 years is plenty. A type of review that doesn't fit within their statutory mandate, because they can't change their statutory mandate. They have to comply with it, and the original regulation, hopefully, was serving that mandate. Yeah, so, for example, it may or may not be possible to develop metrics. It may be that you would have to use quantified or qualitative assessments as to whether it's working.
But again, going back to the option that the agency has, what the bill does is force the agency to think about how will we evaluate this regulation into the future. Not what do we need to do to get it done today, but then what does this mean for the future? And one of the regulations that we like talking about, and it was mandated by Congress, I'm going to close out talking about how we haven't done our job, but it mandated by Congress, which was on conflict minerals. We hear about this all the time, about the record keeping and the reporting and how do we know where this came from. And, you know, we're subject to huge fines even if we don't file a report saying we don't have them. There's huge fines associated with them. And you know, when you look at cost benefits of that kind of regulation and you say, have we stopped the development or the production of conflict minerals? I mean, have we actually achieved a purpose here, or are we just, you know, kowtowing to an ethic that understandably, and I'm not saying that that's not a noble goal to prevent people from enslaving people to, you know, produce minerals, but is this regulation really working to prevent that? And that's really what we're trying, I think, very hard to get at. And if you kind of think about into the future, and I want to talk about our Senator King's bill and the kind of commission, because I think this is an idea that is going to bear fruit here. I think we're going to move a bill like this, and I think there's going to be a lot of bipartisan support. So we truly want to get at a bill that is the best it can be in terms of actually achieving a product. Now, we've been talking about this commission and saying it's 9 people, but we consistently turn to OIRA and say, you're now the expert, right? You're now the expert on rail safety. You're now the expert on this issue. And so I don't know that we're going to solve some of your concerns today, but we really would like you to kind of at least think about this in the context of this is going to happen, how can we make it better? A final point that I want to make in the little time that I have left is Congress. We don't do our job. It's a lot easier to pound the table and damn the agency. It's a lot easier to say, oh, the courts got that wrong. And we look at a regulation that's particularly troubling in my state, which is waters of the United States. That's been back and forth, ping-ponged up to the Supreme Court. The court has done nothing to provide clarity, right? And so we keep rewriting this. And I would tell you, if you flew over North Dakota and looked down, every bit of that water, I think EPA is asserting jurisdiction over. Now, beyond the kind of craziness of that result, I would say, how are they going to manage that once they regulate it? And that's another challenge. And I guess I want to kind of close by saying what we need to do here in Congress is start legislating. Is start when we don't agree with what the agency does, or even when the agency is struggling with a 40-year-old law, we need to take responsibility, and we don't do that very well here. It's a lot easier to criticize than it is to actually make the decision. And so want to give a shout out to all the federal workers who are working hard on these regulations. They could use a better partner in the United States Congress.